United States President Donald Trump has threatened military action in Nigeria over claims of Christian killings. In a social media post, Trump says the U.S. will immediately cut off all assistance to the African country if the killings are not stemmed. The social media post comes a day after Trump announced that Nigeria will be added to a list of countries of particular concern set up to monitor religious persecution around the world. The Nigerian government has vowed to keep fighting the violent extremism, and it says it hopes Washington will remain a close ally. Let's speak now to Newzroom Afrika's international correspondent, Simon Marks, live for us in the US this evening. Simon, good evening to you, our time. President Trump is threatening to get into Nigeria, guns blazing, quote unquote, there. Firstly, we know Nigeria has been struggling with Islamist extremism. Boko Haram is one group that has become very notorious over the years. But what kind of detail did President Trump put forward, and also why now? The timing of all of this?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Xoli. I mean, in terms of the detail, if you were a core supporter of President Trump's Make America Great Again movement and you suddenly read this posting on his social media account yesterday, you would have been left scratching your head, because let's be honest, nationally here in the United States, there is very little coverage of what is taking place in Nigeria. However, it is absolutely evident that there are concerned Christian American, particularly evangelical Christian communities here in the United States that have been surfacing this issue. And this social media posting from President Trump follows intervention by one of his top allies on Capitol Hill, Republican Senator Ted Cruz, who has accused the Nigerian authorities of turning a blind eye to what he calls a massacre of Christians in the country. And Donald Trump, in this social media post, absolutely embraced that very binary understanding of what is taking place in Nigeria. He described Nigeria, the president, as a now disgraced country, said that if the government there continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately cut all aid and assistance to Nigeria. He vowed to wipe out completely the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities, and said that he has instructed what he now calls the Department of War, the old Department of Defense here, to prepare for possible action. He said that if military action begins, it will be fast, vicious and sweet. And he said the Nigerian government should consider itself under warning. The Nigerian government, he said, better move fast, or else, he implied, military action is going to begin. And of course, what is so complex in all of this is that the president and other Republican lawmakers here are presenting this as binary, whereas, as we all know and understand, in fact, if you look particularly at the violence in northern Nigeria, the vast majority of the people being killed are of the Islamic faith. Christians, of course, are also being killed in parts of Nigeria. But this is not a binary issue, Islamic terrorists slaughtering only Christians in Nigeria, as the president is suggesting. And it does make you wonder, Xoli, is this the beginning of Nigeria finding itself on the receiving end of the same kind of rhetoric that South Africa has found itself on the end of throughout this year? You know, with the President of the United States making foreign policy decisions on the basis of a lack of nuanced understanding of what is actually taking place in the country.
Simon, you bring up those two parallels, South Africa and Nigeria. The only difference is that this time the US president is not offering any charter planes to move out the Christians and take them in a safe zone to the US. And one more thing, Simon, and that is that Nigeria is rich in oil. Are we making too much here? Could there be US interest in that regard, or are we really clutching at straws?
Well, I don't think we're making too much at all. I mean, it is extraordinary to see the President of the United States taking to social media and threatening military action against any nation in Africa, much less Nigeria, clearly one of the leading economies in the continent. And so I think that there are all sorts of questions about what is the motivation here. With regard to the refugee issue, we only learnt last week in a filing that was lodged on the US government's Federal Register that President Trump is indeed going to restrict the number of refugees that are allowed to enter the United States to a maximum of 7,500 per year. That's down from 125,000 during the last year of Joe Biden's presidency, and it's even lower than the number of refugees that Donald Trump allowed to enter the United States when he was president and the COVID-19 lockdowns were in place. And, as you know, in that disclosure on the Federal Register, the government here says that most of those 7,500 spots will be reserved for Afrikaners. The government here continuing to believe and argue that they are having their farms expropriated by the government of President Ramaphosa without compensation, even though that hasn't happened, even though the South African government and others have spent months trying to push back against the misinformation that lies at the heart of President Trump's policy towards South Africa. Now, there is an opening in the language that the president's disclosure in the Federal Register used last week that could allow him to open America's doors to Nigerian Christians, because he has already said that he doesn't want the policy to be viewed as a policy for white refugees only, even though there's copious amounts of evidence to suggest that is the intent behind it, including documentation that's been furnished by the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department to the White House. But he could allow Nigerian Christians in to America, saying that they're victims of persecution, but would he allow persecuted members of the Islamic faith in Nigeria who have been on the receiving end of that communal violence into the United States? That's a very big question for the White House.
Interesting times indeed. Simon Marks, always a pleasure talking to you, our international correspondent, talking to us from Washington this evening. Thank you very much, Simon.